Picture yourself in a dimly lit room, the kind where shadows dance on the walls and the air feels thick with secrets. You're tucking a child into bed, reaching for a storybook filled with princesses, talking animals, and promises of happily ever after. It's a moment of warmth, a ritual that feels timeless, safe, almost sacred. But what if I told you that these stories, the ones we whisper to children under the glow of a bedside lamp, were never meant for them? What if I revealed that the fairy tales we cherish, Cinderella, Snow White, Little Red Riding Hood, were born in a world so dark, so brutal, that they were meant to terrify grown men and women into staying vigilant? As a historian who's spent years digging into the corners of the past that others avoid, I've uncovered the chilling truths behind these tales. They're not fairy tales at all. They're medieval horror stories, true crime accounts, and survival guides dressed up in pretty packaging by Disney and the Brothers Grimm. Let's step back into a world where danger was a constant companion, where every once upon a time hid a warning, and uncover the blood-soaked origins of the stories we thought we knew. These tales weren't spun from imagination alone. They were forged in the crucible of medieval Europe, a place of dense forests, isolated villages, and a relentless struggle against famine, disease, and predators, both human and animal. Life was fragile, and death was never far away. Parents didn't tell these stories to entertain their children. They told them to keep them alive. The talking wolves, the wicked stepmothers, the enchanted castles, they weren't fantasies. They were metaphors for real threats, rooted in events so catastrophic they scarred entire communities. The Brothers Grimm, those 19th century German scholars, weren't collecting bedtime stories. They were documenting crime scenes, piecing together oral traditions that carried the weight of murder, betrayal, and loss. Charles Perrault, writing in 17th century France, didn't invent these tales either. He was transcribing whispers from a world where every stranger could be a killer, every forest a trap. These stories were survival manuals, lessons etched in fear to ensure no one forgot the cost of carelessness. Take the Pied Piper, a tale you might recall as a quirky story about a man in colorful clothes ridding a town of rats. But strip away the rats, a later addition to soften the horror, and you're left with one of the most haunting mysteries in medieval history. It's June 26, 1284, in Hamelin, a small German town along the Weser River. The sun is dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows over cobblestone streets. Families are gathering for dinner, the air filled with the clatter of wooden spoons and the murmur of evening prayers. Then a chill runs through the town. Parents call out for their children, but the houses are silent. The streets are empty. By nightfall, the truth hits like a thunderclap. Every child in Hamelin, 130 boys and girls between the ages of 4 and 14, has vanished without a trace. No footprints, no cries, no clues. The town's records, meticulously kept by medieval scribes, capture the devastation. Church windows are etched with images of weeping mothers, town chronicles mark the exact date, and the trauma is so profound it nearly destroys Hamelin. Medieval people didn't record dates like June 26, 1284, unless something earth-shattering happened. The precision screams catastrophe, a moment so horrific it became the town's defining memory. The earliest accounts don't mention rats. They describe a stranger in vibrant, multicolored clothing, pied, as in patchwork, who led the children away with music. Who was he? No one knows. Some chroniclers speculated he was a recruiter for a children's crusade, luring kids to their deaths on a doomed pilgrimage. Others whispered of a mass drowning in the Weser River, perhaps during a botched religious ritual. The darkest theory points to a grim practice of the time: kidnapping children to populate new settlements in Eastern Europe, where hostile lands needed young labor. Whatever the truth, the children were gone, and Hamelin was left hollow. Economic records show the population plummeted, marriages dissolved, and families fled, unable to bear the silence of a town without its children. Even today, a street called Bungelosenstrasse. The street chronicles speak of parents who never recovered, who left Hamelin because the silence was unbearable, the absence of laughter, a wound that never healed. The fairy tale we know turned this mass disappearance into a story about pest control, but the original was a warning to parents. Strangers with charm and promises could steal your children, your future, your everything. And as the people of Hamelin learned, some losses are so great they echo through centuries, leaving behind streets where music dares not play. That same sense of dread, of a world where safety was an illusion, carries us into another forest, another tale. In 1764, in the rugged hills of south-central France, something began hunting. It wasn't a creature from a storybook. It was real, flesh and blood, and it brought terror that spread like wildfire. The French called it La Bête du Gévaudan, the beast of Gévaudan, and for 3 years it slaughtered over 100 people. Men, women, and especially children. Eyewitnesses described a creature like a wolf, but larger than a calf, with reddish fur, a broad chest, and jaws that could snap a human neck in one bite. This wasn't a beast that killed for hunger. It hunted with purpose, stalking lone travelers, waiting until they were isolated in the dense forests, then striking with chilling precision, often aiming for the throat or head. Survivors spoke of its eerie intelligence, how it stood on hind legs, studied its prey, and seemed to relish their fear. Villages shut down. Parents kept their children indoors, and the panic grew so intense it became international news, with newspapers printing weekly updates on the beast's rampage. The beast had a pattern, one that feels hauntingly familiar. It targeted young girls, often between 8 and 16, carrying baskets of bread, cheese, or medicine to relatives. One survivor, Marie-Jeanne Vallée, aged 19, fought it off with a spear while delivering food to her family. Her account reads like a page from a fairy tale. A girl, a basket, a forest path, and a predator that seemed almost human in its cunning. King Louis XV sent his best hunters, offering rewards that drew adventurers from across Europe, but the beast evaded capture, turning entire regions into ghost towns. Parents forbade their children from leaving home, and the fear was so palpable it reshaped daily life. This wasn't just a story. It was the reality behind Little Red Riding Hood. When Charles Perrault wrote his version in 1697, he didn't hold back. His wolf tricks the girl into eating her grandmother's flesh and drinking her blood before devouring her. There's no woodsman, no rescue, just a brutal end. This wasn't fiction. It was a reflection of a world where wolf attacks were documented across Europe. Church records from Germany, France, and Eastern Europe catalog hundreds of cases of wolves entering villages, dragging away children, and terrorizing communities. The big bad wolf was no metaphor. It was a survival guide, teaching daughters to never trust strangers, to avoid lonely paths, and to question anyone who asked too much about their destination. In a world where predators wore both fur and human faces, Little Red Riding Hood was a warning to stay alive. The forest, it seems, was never a safe place, and it leads us to another tale, one of hunger and desperation. Imagine Europe between 1315 and 1322. Gripped by the Great Famine, a 7-year nightmare where crops failed, livestock died, and starvation tore through society like a plague. Families faced a choice no parent should ever make: watch everyone die slowly or sacrifice the youngest to save the rest. Court records from this period document hundreds of cases of child abandonment, where parents led their children deep into forests, gave them a crust of bread or a handful of berries, and left them to die. This wasn't cruelty, it was survival math. With grain prices soaring 800%, many couldn't feed their entire family through winter. The process was heartbreakingly systematic. Parents told their children they were foraging or visiting relatives, walked them far enough that they couldn't find their way back, and vanished while they slept or looked away. But the horror deepens. Medieval chronicles record something even darker: cannibalism. Starving parents sometimes ate their children who died of hunger, and strangers lured desperate kids with promises of food, only to kill and consume them. The gingerbread house in Hansel and Gretel wasn't a fantasy. It was a warning about predators who use food as bait in times of desperation. In Germany, authorities uncovered witch houses, isolated cottages where starving adults resorted to cannibalism, not as witches, but as ordinary people pushed beyond morality by hunger. The Brothers Grimm, collecting their version in the 19th century, captured the trauma of a region scarred by famines and a 30 Years' War. Their story reflects the cold pragmatism of survival. The parents discuss abandoning Hansel and Gretel without tears, as if it were a business decision. Archaeological evidence supports this grim reality. Excavations of medieval forest sites reveal small graves of children who died alone, carbon dated to famine periods. The trail of breadcrumbs Hansel drops? A real survival technique taught to children, using bread, stones, or twigs to mark paths in case they were lost or abandoned. This tale wasn't about adventure. It was a manual for navigating a world where even parents might betray you, where hunger could turn neighbors into monsters. That betrayal, that sense of danger from those closest to you, carries us to a castle in 16th century Germany. In 1533, in the region of Waldeck, a 16-year-old noblewoman named Margrethe von Waldeck was found dead, her body laced with poison. Margrethe had everything a fairy tale princess could want: wealth, beauty, a noble lineage. But she also had a stepmother, Katharina von Hatzfeld, who despised her. The family controlled vast mining operations, employing child laborers so malnourished they were called dwarfs, their bodies stunted by brutal conditions and toxic exposure. Margrethe, troubled by this exploitation, began pushing for reforms that threatened her stepmother's profits. Within months she was dead. A court physician's autopsy revealed systematic poisoning over weeks, using arsenic and mercury, toxins that left her pale, weak, and appearing to sleep before killing her. It's a detail that echoes Snow White's story, down to the pale beauty and the poisoned apple. Katharina, obsessed with vanity, spent fortunes on Venetian mirrors, a detail that became the magic mirror in the fairy tale. After Margarethe's death, her body was displayed in an open coffin, a noble custom, but witnesses noted she looked merely asleep, a side effect of the poisons that preserved her temporarily. The Brothers Grimm, collecting the story 300 years later in the same region, wove these details into a cautionary tale about family betrayal. Snow White wasn't just about jealousy. It was a warning that the people closest to you could be the most dangerous, especially when money and power were at stake. The dwarfs, the mirror, the poisoned apple, they were rooted in a real murder, a real family torn apart by greed, and a young woman whose beauty and compassion made her a target. That same vulnerability, that danger lurking in the guise of safety, brings us to the final tale, one that strips away any illusion of romance. In 1634, Italian poet Giambattista Basile published Sun, Moon, and Talia, the original Sleeping Beauty, and it's a story that chills the blood. A princess falls into an enchanted sleep, but instead of a prince's kiss, a king finds her unconscious and rapes her repeatedly. She gives birth while still asleep, waking only when one of her twins sucks a splinter from her finger. This wasn't fiction. It reflected a horrifying reality. Medieval medical texts document sleeping sickness, likely catatonic states from depression or neurological conditions, leaving women unresponsive for months. Noble families cared for these women, but court records reveal assaults by servants, visitors, or even relatives. Pregnancies were blamed on supernatural causes to hide the truth. Basile's version goes further. The king's wife, discovering his secret children, tries to have them cooked and served to him, a detail rooted in real medieval cases of wives murdering illegitimate children. The spinning wheel curse likely came from ergot poisoning, which caused seizures and unconsciousness, often blamed on curses. Later versions by Perrault and the Grimm brothers turned rape into romance, but the original was a warning. Unconscious women were vulnerable, and the men who rescued them could be predators. These fairy tales, from the Pied Piper to Sleeping Beauty, weren't stories, they were survival tools, teaching medieval audiences to fear the dark, the stranger, and even their own families. As we tell these tales today, we've forgotten their weight, but their truths still whisper. The world is dangerous, and happy endings are never guaranteed. So, what do you think? Did these dark origins surprise you? Or have you always suspected there was more to these tales than Disney let on? Drop a comment below and let me know which fairy tale's hidden history shocked you the most. If you enjoyed diving into these grim truths, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next journey into the shadows of history. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.